How to beat the NT types. INTJ. Number 1. Piss them off with politics. Success in nearly every area of life involves the cultivation and maintenance of relationships. In some environments, there are many to keep track of. If you force INTJs into these highly relational dynamics, sooner or later they'll get annoyed at someone and cut them down to size. Sometimes that will get the person in line. Often though, it builds resentment that will come back to bite them. Number 2. Be unpredictable. INTJs don't like surprises. They are planners who leverage their sometimes preternatural predictive powers to see around corners. Unpredictable and irrational people, in their view, are best avoided. They rarely offer much long-term, sustainable benefit. If you can summon up your mercurial nature, especially if it's combined with an aggressive mindset, it will be harder for them to deal with you. This will sometimes involve making certain moves simply to confuse them. Think of it as channeling your inner Joker to deal with the typically Batman-esque INTJs. Number 3. Exploit their need for closure and resolution. INTJs thrive on solving problems and finding efficient solutions. They like to close the loop on any pending issues or uncertainties. They like to know. In a strategic situation, you can leverage this need for closure by presenting multiple unresolved scenarios or ambiguous options that don't have any clear resolution. This can throw them off balance and make it much harder for them to devise a comprehensive strategy. If you do this for long enough, their need to make things happen might become so strong that they force the issue, become too decisive, too domineering even, and trying to maneuver people like chess pieces in a much more blatant way, thereby making them some extra enemies. Avoid trying to out-strategize them. There's no wisdom in playing them at their own game. Try to remove their ability to be in control, and often for INTJs, that means removing their ability to know, their access to information. INTJs are often type 5s in the Enneagram system. Both them and type 5s believe that knowledge is power. If they lack that, it can throw them off. ENTJ. Number 1. Let them beat themselves. ENTJs push themselves to extreme degrees. Overworking, overreaching, and making unreasonable demands of themselves is quite common for them. This makes them vulnerable, prone to being overstretched, and screwed over by the weight of their own ambition or schedule. Dangle the prospect of great wins in front of them, and let their desire pull them into ill-advised battles and wars. Number 2. Turn their people against them. ENTJs are big, forceful people who aren't afraid to take charge, put themselves out there, and presume leadership. They can speak and act with an authority that seems God-given. That is not always endearing to the people around them who, if the ENTJs being particularly dictatorial, might feel squashed, undervalued, and ran over. Like many great ENTJs throughout history, it was betrayals from people on the inside that brought them down. Number 3. Exploit their impulsive nature. ENTJs have an impetuous streak. Their third slot extroverted sensing is something they like to indulge in. It's a source of relief and pleasure for them. It's the play counterbalance to the work side of them. It can also make them reckless and rash. Knowing this about them will give you an advantage. Encourage them to take risks that you might think will backfire. Avoid direct, head-to-head confrontations. Their charisma, potential interpersonal dominance, and adaptable nature in real time make them hard to beat. ENTPs. Number 1. Drown them in detail. Nothing quite triggers an ENTP more than hearing that a brilliant idea is being halted by detail-obsessed people nitpicking it into oblivion. But such detail devils are abundant, and you can use them to your advantage. In any team environment, find the person who will naturally see the ENTP's ideas as unrealistic or lacking intangible plans of action. Those kinds of people are the perfect, archetypical enemies of the ENTP. It's particularly great because those people, due to their consistent, diligent, and stable nature, often become gatekeepers in the world of work. Plunge ENTPs down into the proverbial paperwork of life. Force them to justify every idea with concrete actions, timetables, budgets, and precision. Then, crucially, hold them accountable and remind them of their previous predictions and assertions. People will eventually see them more as dreamers than doers, which will annoy them. Number 2. Force them to take a stand. ENTPs have introverted feeling as their blind spot. It's easy for them to forego attachments to specific values and ideals. This suits them just fine. They can fluidly move between different camps, have friends on all sides, and never need to be chained to one stance. This preference of theirs is precisely why you should maneuver them into doing so. Of course, they will have principles and deeply held opinions. Everyone does. But when they're being devil's avocados, try to nail them down on what their actual, definitive opinion is, or which approach they think is better on balance. putting them in positions of needing to commit, especially over small things, takes away some of their intellectual mobility. Number 3. Don't let them have their say. If there's one thing that ENTPs will really hate, it's not being able to state their case. This is like an opposite approach to letting them talk too much, which also works. The point of this approach is not to prevent them ever speaking, that's impossible. It's to build up frustration, letting them see people carry on with the status quo, with no innovative updates, keeping them on the outside, waiting to get their chance to argue against it. If you do this for long enough, ENTPs might reach into their toolkit and start to mock people, make fun, roast, troll a bit, or use their powers with language to undermine. This can be very effective, but usually it rubs people up the wrong way and works against them. Avoid debating them. They are linguistic swindlers of the highest order. They will likely win the argument even when they're wrong. They might even say they're wrong during the argument and still win. It's annoying. INTPs. Number 1. Rush them. INTPs are blind to extroverted sensing. They function most at home in highly changeable, fast-paced, intense, and emergency situations. Can INTPs turn their quick minds to such situations? Yes. Can they do well in these situations? Definitely. Can they do it sustainably over and over? That's unlikely. It's not their forte. They prefer to take their time with things, to move at their own pace. Rushing them in high-pressure, fast-changing situations will discombobulate them. They'll make mistakes because they're robbed of their ability to think deeply about a situation and calculate all the permutations. This also pokes them in the procrastination area of their brain, which won't feel good. Number 2. Pit their head against other people's hearts. INTPs make their way in the world by reason. Even when they themselves are in the throes of their emotions, they can still step out of that and view themselves dispassionately, from a bird's eye perspective. When they are pitted against people who are determined to not let reason and logic be a salient factor in their life, it's an impasse. It's also really annoying. If you can make sure that interactions between INTPs and such people go thoroughly unsmoothly, it will definitely cause them issues. Maneuver them into emotionally charged situations and watch their circuits go haywire. Number 3. Encourage inertia. This is like the opposite approach to point 1. There will be times where it's better to foster their tendency to be overly content with their usual routines and habits. Let them languish there. Let them stagnate when it comes to their approach to things. While they'll always naturally seek intellectual variety, they might not update other aspects of their life as readily. Avoid trying to beat them on detail, specifics, or arguments predicated on "this makes sense." If you're saying that your side makes logical sense and an INTP is disagreeing with you, probably not a good sign.